All right, welcome, Dr. Sam, to this show today. And I just want to welcome those who are watching. This is PhD Stories. This is a YouTube channel where we're encouraging people, those who are prospective PhD students, those who are currently in the program, if you want to learn something about the PhD journey and just get to learn from experience of others, something that will be helpful to you. So today I have a special guest, Dr. Samuel Ruhiu. I think he's going to introduce himself with respect to his profession, his training, his PhD. Welcome so much, Dr. Samuel Ruhiu.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Harry. It's a joy to be here and just to share our stories. There's something about stories.
Yeah.
We're relational beings and we connect through stories. Sometimes we're too careful about what we write and how we analyze things and forget that really, what we like the scripture says that as a man thinks, so is he. So it's good for us to be able to communicate. So yes, and again, this is interesting. PhD journeys. I think not two journeys are the same.
True.
I've met lots of people who've gone through this. I've listened to mentors who mentored people, many PhDs, and I think we are all very different.
Yeah.
Maybe to start us off, I could, with your permission, just go back a little bit and give you my background so that we can then see how this journey began. So
Yeah.
my first degree was in engineering. And how I got in there is another story. Let me not get in there. By the time I was graduating, I knew I was not going to be an engineer the rest of my life. So because I began asking, what am I going to do with myself? I started doing engineering work, but that I realized it wasn't for me. So at the end of the time, I just received Christ as Lord, and I began to know how to pray and seek the Lord. And I began to ask God, what am I going to do? And after some time, I felt that I felt like he was leading me to go back and do computing. And so I began applying around and looking for opportunities to go back and do my master's in computing. And I had a desire to, at some point, go back to lecturing. So to cut the long story short, I got through my place of work a scholarship from the World Bank. It was a training vote on a project we were doing, and I went to do my master's in the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. It has since been reincorporated back into Manchester University. You may not hear of it, but it used to be a separate entity. So I was there, and of course I did my conversion masters into IT, into computing. And after that, I got back. Of course, I came back and worked. I had to work in my place of work for 2.5 years because they gave me the scholarship. Then after that, I began looking around for work because, I wanted to go out there and work.
You weren't lecturing then?
We're talking about, no, at that time I was still working at where I was working before, but now I was moving towards IT work. Now, think about this. We're talking about 1996, 97. I had a master's in computing. So at the time, the IT sector wasn't as developed. So getting jobs at my level was tough because people felt maybe I was overqualified or might ask for too much money, and maybe the work that was there was for programming and stuff like that. So I struggled a little bit. Then at some point, I did interviews and people didn't take me for those reasons. But at some point, I remembered, hey, I'd promised the Lord I'd like to teach. So I applied for work. My first job was in Nazarene University, African Nazarene University. Then, of course, I went to work at the University of Nairobi, Institute of Computer Science, it was called at the time. So that's how it started. So yes, my master's was in computing, and it was a conversion master's. And so I knew that when I came back to academia, I have to ultimately do a PhD. If you're lecturing, you have to basically do a research degree.
Yeah.
And so I began looking around and wondering, what do I do? What topic do I pursue? What area do I pursue? Now, at that point in time, there wasn't too much research happening at the Institute of Computer Science. So real serious research taking place. So it's a bit difficult. And now that we're talking to perhaps prospective students or people on the journey, maybe let me just mention this.
Yeah.
If you go to a university, you want to go to a university where research is taking place, where there are research groups that are addressing some of your area of interest. Because if you come to that research group and maybe find a professor there has a grant and is pursuing a certain area, then he probably already has funding for some scholarship in your PhD. But much more importantly, because he's pursuing that area, he's interested, because he wants to bring people on board that will help him solve the problem, so that even his PhD students will come and attach themselves to that research group and then find areas where they can be able to move. But then he wants them to solve his problem, so he'll direct you along certain paths in your general area, so that then as you interact with the rest of the research group, very quickly, you begin to pick up, you begin to do the literature review, you begin to get clear, then you begin to get the topics, the latest cutting edge research, and shortly you can identify your gaps and begin to move.
Yeah.
So because that wasn't happening at the time, in my place, it was difficult. So you have to read around, look around, ask, and I think there wasn't any other university, maybe in the region of PhD computer science. So that took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But within time, I decided to apply. So I began applying to universities in the West. I did not get admission, and maybe now that we are talking, we can be a bit unstructured. Let me just mention that, because I was applying, I would put down my thoughts, my ideas, and apply to this university and this department. A better thing would have been, I would get into that university, check out their website, look at what research areas they're addressing, look at the professors there, find any professors who is doing something interesting I'd like to pursue, read around it a little bit, get conversant a little bit, develop some interest, then reach out to him or to her and say, hey, I've been looking at your work and it's interesting. I'm thinking of coming to do a PhD. These are my areas of interest, and I'm really keen to be able to do that. So you engage them, because if you engage them and they get interested, then when you then go to apply, you'll be applying something close to what he's doing, and he or she will already be knowing there's someone who is reaching out, so that, then of course they'll be able to know whether they have a scholarship or can direct you. But I didn't have that background. I wasn't supported in that way. So of course, I applied and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But
It happens.
finally, of course, there's pressure for me to register for a PhD. So I did some kind of proposal. I registered at the University of Nairobi. Then at that point in time, there was an ongoing collaboration with the Free University of Brussels. Actually, not really Free University of Brussels, but with it's called Flanders. Flanders is the northern part of Belgium, and they speak the dialect of Dutch. So they had given scholarships to developing countries, and they were collaborating with the University of Nairobi. We could get a scholarship in any university there. But there are some colleagues of mine, 4 of them who are already, taking their PhD at that university. So I wasn't supposed to go there, but somehow my boss decided they can try and see whether I can get a bit of money. So I began a sandwich program between the University of Nairobi and the Free University of Brussels. And I used to go for 2 months and come and work. So yes, that's how I began. But what should I say? Let me just finish that story.
Yeah, go on.
So I started and I had an interest. Okay, before that, I had finally decided I want to do something to do with research on ICTs and development. Thinking about effects, impacts, outcomes of ICT on society, some of the effects it have on society. So I began to develop an interest in that. So I started thinking about, policy, ICT policy, thinking about ICT strategy for countries, and I wrote a research proposal about it.
Yeah.
But when I went to Brussels, I was assigned a professor, and I worked with him for 2 months. And at the end of the 2 months, he told me, "Sam, this is not my area of interest. This is not my area of expertise. Please look for someone else."
Oh, in the same university, or?
Yeah, the Free University of Brussels.
Yeah.
So now, at that point, my professor had come from University of Nairobi. And it just so happened that I was checking things online and saw something interesting articles and papers. And I reached out to the professor, because I thought he was doing something that I really love. And he responded. And as we corresponded, it so happened that he came from that very university, the Free University of Brussels.
Interesting.
And then he had sent me some books and some papers he had written. So when I landed there, I began looking for him. So when this other professor said, "I can't work with you," my professor said, "You had talked about your Scott Leo, you talk about Leo. Why don't we go and see him and see whether he'll take you on?" So I went, we talked with him, and yes, he was interested, but he said something, and this is important for those who listen to this. That I can take you on, I can supervise you on one condition. You must begin to do research in my area of interest right now. Wow. So if you're willing to change and begin to work on what I'm working on, we can work together.
Wow. So you abandon your area and focus on his.
And basically focus on his. So at that point in time, he was actually working on a technology forecasting, thinking about futures, thinking about trends, and then thinking about futures, because he was working on a project in the EU, which was trying to look at how EU would fund broadband, ICT infrastructure, and thinking about the kind of technologies that would be there and how they would affect and impact society. So he said, I'm working with futures.
Yeah.
So I dropped what I was doing, and he gave me lots of papers to read. So I come back to Kenya with many papers to read. And I developed a complete new proposal around technology forecasting and how we can actually utilize it to more or less, inform policy and strategy in developing countries.
Yeah. How long into the program is this now, at this point in time?
I've just started at that point in time. I just started. I've just been registered. It's called provisional registration. It used to be at the University of Nairobi. So I've been there for 2 months.
Okay.
And then he says, you change. So I took another year.
Yeah.
So now my proposal is ready. In fact, that's a proposal that now I gave, like it was approved at the University of Nairobi, the new proposal.
Yeah.
And I went back to Belgium after 1 year. And he was excited about what I had come up with. But he told me, "You know what, Sam? There's only one problem. This kind of research that we are doing, you can't do it back in Africa. You need to come here in Europe, because then in Europe, that's where things are moving, and you'll be able to engage. There's data collection, there's data back home, you can't get it. Unfortunately, I don't have a grant, so I can't bring you over.
Wow.
So I love your proposal. If you did this if you finish, you get a job with the EU, but no, we can't do this here. So I'm sorry, but would you be interested in something very interesting that I think that you can do and to benefit you and your country?" So
he wants you to change again.
Now you want me to change again. So of course he tells me that one area that is really hot right now is the use of ICTs for reduction of poverty. So there's a lot of research that's happening, but it's still very fluid. Would you be interested? Okay, so I said, let me give it a thought. So of course, maybe after a week, I said,
so that would be applicable now back in Kenya, not, I mean, that would work in Kenya.
Yeah, back in Kenya, back in Africa. And of course, some of those countries like the EU, of course, would fund, that kind of research. At that point in time, a lot of money was coming into ICTs and development. In fact, 2001, the World Bank alone spent 1.1 billion US dollars in initiatives and projects of ICTs and development across the world. So there's a lot of funding at that point in time. And so, you know, there are all kind of prospects you wanted it. So
yeah.
So I came back to Kenya. Now I spent 2 months. We more or less agreed on how to move. I came back home, and then I developed a third proposal.
So would he be the supervisor for this third proposal?
Yes. Now
Okay.
he's interested. He's saying, okay, because his PhD was in ICTs and development.
Yeah.
He'd actually done his PhD. His data collection was in South Africa. So he's quite conversant with Africa.
Okay.
So he said, this is something we can work together. So I changed, and of course, I started now my other proposal, and of course that, you know, that gelled, that settled, and I began work. Two things to mention here. Though he was, you know, he was interested in the area, though he had done ICTs for development, but his expertise was in communication. All right. So he was not really an expert in ICT.
ICT, yeah.
And back home, my professor who was supervising me was basically a computer scientist coming from maths. He was not an expert. So I'm working with these two professors
who are not subject specialists.
Subject specialists, and each of them have their own ideas how they should go. And so sometimes they'll give you guidance differently, and some, of course, were stronger than others. So to tell you the truth, I was caught in between for a while. It wasn't very interesting. But anyway, so I finally settled, and I began to move towards basically researching around the use of ICTs to reduce poverty at the community level. So that's ultimately what I ended up pursuing for my PhD.
Yeah. So that was eventually approved by the university, and these two supervisors, you ended up working with them.
Yes, I was approved. So I began working with them. So, and that was interesting because I think after a while, I began to develop interest. I began to look at, so now, of course, if I'm doing with poverty reduction, I had to do a lot of learning in development studies. So economics and development studies, because that's basically around development and poverty reduction. And then, of course, you have to bring in ICTs. So I did quite a bit of work around that, and I finally identified a foundational theory in development studies. It's called the capability approach, or development as freedom. And I then began to develop my proposal around that general area. And so, yes, so that was probably my, my third
proposal?
proposal
That eventually became your study. How did the journey unfold? How did it unfold now going on?
The journey. Yes, so now parts of what began to happen is that when I would go to Belgium, I would just be working on my research, okay? Back in Kenya, I had teaching duties. Then, of course, I have family and everything else. So that was a challenge because, you know, you kind of stretch thin, you know, because you have to work, you know, you're working in the evening, you have family, there are these responsibilities. But in Belgium, you could actually work as many hours as possible. So by the time you're coming from there, within those 2 months, you've done probably maybe as much as you'd work the whole year. So I then began to work and finally developed my proposal, and I began to move. But now what began to happen is that I had two supervisors. The one in Belgium would read my work with a tooth comb and bring me back my drafts read. The one in Kenya didn't have time to read my work. So sometime I go to Belgium and I come back, and he's like, I think what you need to do right now is basically agree, because I think you have your research questions, you have your objectives. It's clear what you want to do. You actually need to go to do data collection. I come back home and I talk to my professor, And I sent him the work, my chapter 1 and chapter 2. And, when I got to talk to him and discuss, I realized he's a very ignorant. He's a professor, so
yeah, but this is not
that
his
he's
area.
ignorant, but he's not read my work, and he's not a subject expert. So you begin talking and you realize we're not quite agreeing. And so that happened for a while, and at some point it gets to you, look, I need help. I'm working so hard, you're not giving me guidance. And then, you're very strong. Also, people who are very strong personalities feel, I think you should do this. I said, okay. But the professor in Belgium says, Sam, this is your PhD, you make the decisions. So he tells you, use this model. So at some point, I remember I reached my end and said, why? So we had a disagreement, an academic disagreement.
With your Kenyan supervisor?
Supervisor. Yeah, unfortunately, he didn't take that very well. And he more or less said, Sam, you can work on your own if that's what you want. You keep listening to the other professor, and he's not even a scientist.
Yeah. Oh my.
So you work on your own, we shall meet at the defense. That's a threat. So I think for a year, I dropped everything. I said, I got discouraged. I went to talk to my boss and said, please, can you change my supervisor? So she advised against it for many reasons. Said, just find a way of working around him. So I lost a bit of time, maybe a year or more, because we couldn't quite agree on how to work.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he tell you to do this. So I finally said, okay, I'm going to do it. Then you push.
So finally you went back to him humbly, of course.
Yeah, you have to humble yourself because you don't want to meet at the defense with your professor.
Yeah.
He'll destroy you.
Yeah.
And then my boss didn't want me to change. So I went back to him and we began working together. I decided, okay, you want me to do this? I'm going to do it. But because, after a while, by the way, after working for 1-2 years in an area, you actually become the expert.
Yeah, because you've read a lot in that area.
Yeah, you read all the cutting edge research. You read all the work. Maybe you're doing critical analysis. You actually begin to move away from your supervisor, but he's a researcher.
Yeah.
So he's a researcher, she's a researcher, so she'll be asking the questions, the difficult questions. Did you check this? Did you check this? This doesn't make sense. And so they more or less become a mentor of research, not so much now the subject area.
Yeah.
So I would say, okay, let me go. So twice I did what he told me, and over towards the end, I hit a wall. Because he's not a subject expert, he's not read very much. So of course you go and hit a wall. So it was a bit discouraging and I lost time. But at some point, he resigned from the university.
Oh.
So now when he resigned, I didn't have some
dynamics changed.
Yeah, and then the project that was sponsoring me to go to Belgium came to an end. So so now I lost a bit of time, but I had to get another supervisor. So finally I got the present supervisor where I finished with. He's called Professor Aema.
So you had, what about the Belgium one? It continued.
The challenge with that is now that I'm not funded, we kind of after a while, more or less like lost contact. We didn't continue to work together. To be truthful is, because of the many challenges I had back in Nairobi, I got a bit discouraged. So he's pushing me and says, Sam, you need to go and collect data. I think you've done enough.
Yeah.
I think you need to do this. Now, I can't tell him I'm in trouble on this other side.
Yeah.
We kind of lost touch a little bit.
Yeah.
So now I'm working, but I finally got someone who was keen. Again, they were not experts, but they were keen. They would read my work, they would discuss my work, and they'll be supportive. In fact, some of those professors will push you because they want you to move. And they're researchers, they're critical researchers. So of course I began to move very fast. I had to revise my proposal because he felt my scope was big. I had to revise it a bit more, refine it a little bit more. And of course that made it then easier. So ultimately, of course, I began to move ahead, and I refined my problem a little bit more, my questions. my methodology, and I began to collect data. I did my data collection in some ICT projects and initiatives in Western Kenya.
Yeah.
Yes. So
do you think this contextual, because now looking at your Belgian supervisor is telling you this one is ready, you need to go and collect data. Your Kenyan supervisor is telling you, this, it's giving you different verdict or feedback. Is it a question of context, or what would you attribute that to? The back and forth on this other side and the push on this other side.
Ideally, and I think increasingly today, I think in most universities, they'll probably give you 2 supervisors. The second one, of course, is just to support, just to make sure that there's a bit of, objectivity in it all. They're supportive, but you are the first supervisor. But the best scenario would be that these 2 supervisors are able to sit and talk and agree. Or when you come to present, you present to them both.
Yeah.
When they get your work, they can fight if they want to fight. But ultimately, you agree as a team how you move ahead. Or even if you don't agree, you thrash it out, then come back to you, then you get direction. But the challenge was now, this one was in Belgium, this one is here.
They don't seem to be talking.
They don't seem to be talking. And for whatever reason, my professor here, who's a food professor, I don't know why he was feeling a bit, I don't know, he wasn't feeling very confident. For the moment you tell me you're listening to this other guy, you're not even a computer scientist. There's something there. So because they agree, then you get mixed signals.
Yeah.
Then ideally, and I think a supervisor is a critical element of your research journey. You need to get someone who, by and large, within time, you get a working relationship. You get some kind of rapport. You get to agree on how you're going to work together. You get to come to a place where, yes, he's your mentor, but is it possible to work until you get to a certain place where you can agree on how to move together, so that even if you probably don't see eye to eye, you can come down and thrash it out objectively as researchers, down to earth, so people feeling a bit, thrown, then you agree on what do they expect of you, after how long should you come back, how long should you be reporting, what will be the deliverables, if you hit a wall, what do you want, that kind of thing. So I think that lacked with my supervisor here. We never really got to gel to work together, and that, I think, brought difficulties. I think when someone is starting their research journey, you don't always choose your supervisor again, because, if, for instance, you get a scholarship or you go to another university or you go and check online and say this, you don't know them. But you somehow have to go and work with them and find some kind of rhythm, some kind of working together. Of course, he's ahead, but how does he work? I think it's a bit of learning them, so that you see how to work around them, because the PhD is yours.
That's true.
No one has gone that way before, so you can't be told what to do. They can only mentor you and help you, but there must be a way of agreeing, because you learn research by doing research. And so you need someone who's gone ahead, someone who can ask, who can be able to guide you. So I think that's what took me forever. And by that time, I think I was a bit beaten. So when I got this new professor who was very supportive, I wanted to be perfect. So when you agree on something, you don't work, you don't want to look foolish, you don't want to look like you don't know what. So I would disappear for months.
Before you come back.
Where are you? What is happening? But I want to bring something perfect, which is something I'll say, no, it doesn't work like that in research. Walk, and when you hit a wall, come back to your supervisor, talk to him. Say, I've tried this doesn't make sense. Maybe this doesn't make sense, or I don't know what to do. Come and admit it, because that's, let me just mention this. It's good to ask questions. It's wise to ask questions. It's wise to admit you don't know. Because if research was easy, then we wouldn't need to do research.
True.
If the area you are researching is known, then you don't need to do research. Right? So just come back and admit, I don't know what to do. I don't understand this. And this is what I've done. Does it make sense? Sometimes you even find out that you're thinking you don't know anything, but maybe what you think you don't know, it just needs someone to ask you a question, it flips it. So you still don't know too bashed. So again, I also lost a bit of time in that. But anyway, by and large, I got this new supervisor, and I think we began to working together. That is, you read my work. I was careful again, but yeah, somehow we finally finish. But that's just an overview of my journey.
Wow, it's such a journey, such a journey. And at least thankfully the other supervisor did not give up, because the Belgium one, I mean, he had been pushing you initially. You know, some people might think, this one doesn't just want to focus. Let me give up on the whole process altogether. Thankfully, he didn't give up.
No, he didn't give up. He's an interesting guy. Like I explained, he keeps saying, "Sam, this is your PhD." That was his premise from the very beginning. I'll guide you. I will ask you questions. I will work with you as a mentor. But this is your PhD, and you have to make the decisions as you go along. So this is a way. I think this is a way to work. He'll ask you the difficult questions. He'll critique your work.
Yeah.
But at those points, he doesn't tell you what to do. You have to make the decision. This other one failed. You need to tell me what to do, which I don't think you should work like that, because you're a researcher. You're learning to do research.
Yeah.
So he didn't give up. At least he encouraged me, and I was able to settle down. And when I finally settled down with my second supervisor in University of Nairobi, he would read my work. You go away for a month and come back and my work is red, because I used to print it. Everywhere is red. So of course we go with him page by page, and he's asking, what about this? Why did you do this? It doesn't make sense. Clarify this. No. I think you should check this out. Did you read this paper? Why don't you try this? So at least, you may finish the session feeling like, goodness gracious, man, I've put in 3 months, I ain't done nothing. But then slowly you begin to learn. You begin to be critical. You begin realizing you can't just make certain decisions. You can't just be, subjective. You must be a bit objective.
Yeah.
So that really helped me as a risk to learn to grow as a researcher, because now we were discussing like peers. I know, of course, he's way ahead, but he's asking, he respects that I've read, I've done all this literature review, I've come with this proposal, I have these research questions, I have this framework. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was saying, blessed is he who finds a supervisor who comes down to their level to engage intellectually. Discuss.
And such supervisors are not many. Getting to hear stories about people, there's something you've mentioned about you approach the department and interested in changing the supervisor. And I've had stories and even advice that, it is not in your best interest to change a supervisor. I don't know what you think about that.
That's a good question.
Especially in our context.
Especially in our context. This is what I would say. I don't know there is a correct answer to this, but hopefully you will not reach a place where things are so bad that you feel you need to change your supervisor. But there can be situations where the supervisor, like my first supervisor, the very first one in Belgium said, this is not my area of expertise. I'm struggling. Please get someone else.
Yeah.
Or maybe, you realize as you go along that this guy is challenged, this guy, is far from, but again, as at this level of PhD, really, you don't necessarily have to be a subject expert. You can support me as a researcher and help me in my journey. Just mentor me in the journey of research, even if you're not a subject. But then you can also find someone, maybe they are not available.
Yeah.
Not available for you, they don't give you time. And when they give you time, they don't give you enough time. They don't listen to you. They're not giving you guidance. So I think at that point in time, you can actually then discuss with whoever is head of research in an institution, or maybe the dean or the chairman, and discuss it, objectively and openly. And if you're not working together, there's no reason why they can't choose a supervisor. Like right now at the University of Nairobi, you're given two.
Yeah.
There's the first and the second one. The second one is more or less be there to more or less give balance. So there is again no bias. But then also a check, so the other one also doesn't, push the student too much. So of course, in the worst case scenario that you cannot complete work with a first supervisor, then of course, in that scenario, you can fall back to the other supervisor. Hopefully you have a better working relationship.
Yeah.
But I think always good to get advice from the chairman. Again, just like in any other place, sometimes you may find an environment, even in academia, which is not very
conducive.
Or people are not open.
Yeah.
Or people have interest. So sometimes I don't want to use a bad word, but this is about knowledge creation. It's about inquiry. It's about supporting people to move on. It's not about me and my ego. It's not about what I think. Ideally, by the time you're finishing your PhD, you should become humble, because you realize you know very little. And it's been very tough. You realize you're not as clever. So you should become humble. But you find some people, it gets to their head, as they rise up. So they put people down. They don't want to listen. They think they're very clever. So there can come a situation where your relationship with your supervisor is toxic. Now, you can't have a toxic, relationship with your mentor. So at that point in time, talk to the chairman and see how they can negotiate, so that perhaps you can get to someone else without making the other person feel. Because some people will spoil your name as this guy is lazy, this guy doesn't listen, this guy doesn't do this. Now you're in trouble. And I've heard that, and I know it's something. I had to take a student once an MSc because they disagreed completely with the supervisor, and of course the supervisor is very unhappy. And so even for me, I'm reluctant. I don't want to ruffle feathers. I know. Someone has to come in and support the student. I mean, they're just learning to do research. So it's a dicey situation. But I think if you get a mature chairperson or dean, they should be able to resolve that.
Yeah.
Either talk to this other person, or get someone else, or maybe bring another supervisor at least, so that there can at least be, so that you can be supported.
Exactly.
The PhD's journey is challenging enough. It's lonely enough. It's difficult enough. It's painful enough without the stress of quarreling with your supervisor.
To add on to these other things.
Yeah.
It is true. It is true. And there's a comment that your first supervisor made a comment that, if you drop me, you're just going to meet at the defense. And I think also that's another precarious. I mean, you're thinking, if I drop this guy, then he's going to be the one attacking me during the defense. Now I'm done for.
Because if he says that and he decides to push the chairman to be in
the panel,
in the panel, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
It's like a threat, which
is very sad, and especially sad to say in our public institutions. I've had enough cases, and honestly, for myself, from the onset, I'd not go to a public university for my PhD. I think having heard enough stories of this ego issue and being being fought, and just things not working. And I am hoping things are much better. You worked in the in the public sphere, public university for long. I'm hoping things are much better now.
I think what I would say, it really depends on the faculty, it depends on the department. I mean, I work at the University of Nairobi, and I am blessed to work in an environment which is very open, which is very democratic, which is very supportive. It's like family. People are down to earth. People work we work as a team. I think that's the word I'm looking for. People work as a team, people are supportive. And so even when you're bringing students on board, PhD students, you know, we like to see them graduate. We actually push them. We want to see them graduate. We want to see them refine their proposal so they can begin. Of course, in the beginning, every researcher struggles. So there's always a struggle, but I've seen at least there's a culture in my place. We want to see people move and graduate. So
Which
I think
it
depends. The university depends on the department. It depends perhaps on the dean or the chairman and the kind of environment and climate that has been created. You know, sometimes there's validation, there's everything. But still, I mean, I'm from a public university and I'm from a department. We used to be a faculty or department right now, which is very open, you know, to the place where we have like 5 members. Is it 5? Maybe 5 members, and we're getting more of our faculty actually used to be our students. We've actually seen them grow and get their PhD. So there's some collegiate kind of thing. So what I would advise is, I think before you get into a PhD, don't just dismiss it's public or it's private. I think try and find out a little bit about it, you know, informally, you know, look at, for instance, look at the website, you know, look at the kind of research they are doing, look at the different faculty members, the different researches they're doing, the kind of papers they're producing, perhaps see if it's possible, you know, if they have open fora, you know, where they discuss things or seminars. Some of these days they're online. Get in there, you know, follow them.
Maybe even talk to some of them that you know.
Engage with them that you know, engage with the PhD students that are there, you know, and get to find out what am I getting myself into, because so that you're clear. Then even within that mess, sometimes you get up, you know, someone who actually is down to earth and very supportive. So I think it's not a blanket thing. There's still many universities where you have very supportive people who really want to support you. But then, you know, in the private universities, you know, things are a bit tighter because, you know, you have your performance indicators, you have this, you got to support a student.
Structures and place.
Structures and systems, and even if the student doesn't do well, you have to go explain. You know,
so
it puts pressure on
so
you.
it forces people to work.
Be able to work. But I still feel don't just dismiss the EU. I mean, I struggled, I suffered myself. But the next supervisor was a very supportive man. You know, and
sorry, by the way, how long did the whole journey take?
Okay, my journey took long. Because, you know, I think I said I changed my my proposals 3 times. So that probably took like 3 years, almost 4 years. Then, of course, after now settled down, we had this quarrels. September lose months or a year. Then, of course, my supervisor left. So now I have to bring another supervisor who wants to refine my proposal a little bit more. So I would say that perhaps the actual work may have taken like 4 years. But another 4 years was spent having very many challenges. And maybe another 2 years or the very beginning where I don't know my left and my right and I don't know what to do. So someone can say my journey took like 10 years. But the actual work took actually 4 years when I finally focused. But it took forever to focus because of the many problems I had. Yes. Okay, of course. You know, the scripture says all things work together for good for those who love God and those who are called according to his purpose, because I am not boasting, but because of all what I've gone through, by God's grace, I can be empathetic to a student. Today, a student is given to me, a PhD student, and he's really struggling. And sometimes it can almost be discouraging because you're trying to get him to see things. You can't think for him. You can't do things for him, but sometimes it takes too long. But when I think I'm getting to my end, I'm like, you know what, I struggled, you know.
Yeah.
And then it also allowed me to read very, very widely.
Yeah.
So now I am very broad in my thinking.
Yeah.
And I'll give you another story when it came finally to defense, which
Yes.
helped me to open up a little
You should
bit
talk
more.
about it.
Yeah, so it helps you. You become more empathetic, you're a bit more open, it allows you to read a lot.
Yeah.
So as a researcher, a better researcher.
Yes.
Yes, but yes, that's part of it.
How was the
But yeah,
defense? You've alluded to it. How was the defense?
so of course I did my, I did, you know, did my, you know, my data analysis, I mean data collection, did my analysis, and
Yeah.
I used to be very careful, like I said, you know, I want to make sure that I take my time. And, but I finally thought I have something. And my supervisor said, he thinks it is time, get everything together. We give, we informed the graduate school, you know, that, you know, I'm ready to defend. And of course, my supervisor told me, you know, I'll send your work to a professor in the UK as an external supervisor, external examiner. I think he had friends in South Africa, but I said, I want to send you to global experts, because in his words, he said, the best you can do is tell you to make improvements. In other words, he was confident enough that the work we had done was good enough. So he said, I don't know her very well, but we have been in probably conferences together. So I'm going to send your work to the, you know, it's the Holloway University of the UK. Later on, she went to Sheffield. So yes, so my work was sent to her. She's an expert, a global expert in ICT for development. She's written books.
Yeah.
So, well, it went to her, and she took about 3 months plus with my thesis. And then when the time for graduation neared, then everyone panicked. So my supervisor called her and the work came back. And so I was given about a week to prepare for my defense.
Yeah.
And yes, so of course I did my defense. But what I began to notice is that there are two of my colleagues who are on the panel, and then some other professors.
Yeah.
My colleagues are asking very difficult questions, and I know their area of expertise. I'm wondering, wow, where are you coming from? But anyway, you went through the defense. You know, you present, then of course you're called in. Then of course they ask you the tough questions. Now the professors who read your thesis. So of course I came in and defended. Then my professor says, by the way, Sam, he's very open. There's Sam, Professor Klein told me to tell you that you did excellent work. Now that is the external supervisor.
The external examiner, yeah.
So my boss laughed and said, Sam, we will not hear that because your supervisor is trying to influence us. We still need to sit. But anyway, of course, I went away. They said, okay, your work is okay. You need to do some minor corrections. Okay, so we give you 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, do your minor corrections and bring the work. Now, my administrator took almost a week to bring me the comments.
Wow.
When they came back, there were like 154 comments. Some of them were major.
These 2 weeks, these minor corrections.
These minor corrections.
Yeah.
So I'm in shock. Then when I'm going to read it, some of them are very fundamental. I had to rewrite a quarter of my literature review. So at some point I got a bit discouraged. Then I was given 2 weeks because graduation.
And graduation is nearing.
Yeah. So now my boss calls me, you know, now he's the head of department. Sam, where is the thesis? Then shortly, the head of graduate school, who was a professor in our college, calls, said, Sam, where is my thesis? Then finally my professor calls and says, Sam, what's going on? So of course I explained. So let me just explain why that took place.
Yeah.
She's a global expert, but the same area of ICT for development. And we're using the same foundational development studies theory to support this poverty reduction. But then at some point in her research, she took off at a certain tangent. Okay. So all the other professors that I'm citing and quoting, including the one who came up with the theory, they are moving in a different direction. So she feels she's right. So she's not fighting me, but she is doing it intellectually, questioning my work. In other words, questioning her intellectual colleagues up there. So I'm
through your work.
a wall that I don't understand. So I'm almost discouraged. And one time in my trying to revise and review and everything else, this is the same person who said I did excellent work. I noticed a book she had written and a foreword that a colleague who had cited had done the foreword, the preface to the introduction. Within that, I realized, as I read that, I realized what had happened. So she had adjusted this theory with another theory, and so she pushes her position. So that's why she's asking these very difficult questions. Of course, I have done my work. I can fight her.
And yes, in fact, that's what I'm thinking, that you had the opportunity to actually say, no, that's your direction, this is mine.
Yeah, this is what I want to do. Why should I do it like that? I took an informed decision to do this. And then based on the top experts. Now, you can't, I was subjective, I was critical. Where are you coming from? So at some point, do I fight? I say, so, process, my supervisor calls me and says, Sam, that lady, now he's calling her a lady, she wants everybody to cite all her work. Listen, do what you need to do, So it's okay, I rewrote quite a bit of in terms of methodology and research, the results and everything was okay. But she asked me very many questions. Then, of course, the fact that my supervisor was not a subject expert, because my thesis was large, I jettisoned some work. Now this subject expert wants some of the work to come to buttress what I've come up with. So now that was where the battle was coming from. But anyway, I was able to finally finish, and I was able to made all those corrections. Probably took me 3 weeks, and I was able to give in, and I was able to graduate. But just to tell you something quickly is that now that process wasn't sweet, but it allowed me to think very broadly, and it allowed me to see that researchers take positions, informed positions, and they don't necessarily have to agree. If you take a position as a researcher, just make sure that you are standing on solid ground. Just make sure that you've done your.
You can justify your position.
Justify your work. So it doesn't matter whether it's the most celebrated guy in the world. You can debate him. You say, okay, fine, I hear you. You've done this. This is what I do, and I'm standing on theory. I'm standing on other people. So you can't just push me off. So it helped me to come to the place where it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, with all humility, but if it's just being objective, it's arguing, it's doing this, then it doesn't really matter. So it helped me to get wider and get a bigger heart and not feel intimidated. This is research. And of course, as you work with other people, you work with professors from other universities, other departments, you realize, come on, man, we're just human beings. We just learned a few things about something very small. So.
Interesting. The academic ups and downs. And I don't know if you were to now advise a current or even a prospective student, who could even be already in the system, is contemplating is it still worth having long in the system? I don't know. I don't know what you tell them, because some people definitely are there where they're wondering. There have been so much infightings. Here resources are running out. I'm even being asked, and I don't know how you're actually battling the question of, so how's your PhD? When are you done? When will you be done?
That's a good question. My family was very supportive, but at some point they started asking when I'm going to finish. And the boys a bit quiet. They used to pray a lot, but they're not praying anymore. I think they're beginning to His dad of ours, what happened to him? And of course, they'll keep asking, you don't want to tell them really. But I think what I would say is that the PhD journey is not straightforward. Twists and turns and ups and downs. It's lonely. It's challenging. And perhaps those who haven't started the journey, this is what I always tell people, please count the cost before you start a PhD. You know, make sure that will work for you as a career and your future. Do you want to go into research? Do you love research? Do you want to go and work for a research organization? Do you want to work in an academic organization? You know, so let's be clear, because it's not a title, man. It's not prestige. People run up and down within some university. No. It's about learning how to do research. So let's resolve that. Is that your interest? Will that push your career? Do you see yourself as a researcher in the years to come? So if that's it, and then you identify an interesting area, a place where you like to make a contribution or something you like to do, then okay. In that case, you've counted the cost, because believe you me, for some time you have no life. And it becomes a burden. And until it's off your shoulders, it just weighs you down. It's not, so it becomes very, very heavy sometimes if it drags out. But I think for me, what I would say is, if you're in there, don't give up. Trust God for grace
to finish.
Push through and finish.
Yeah.
I think doing a PhD leaves you a better person. I think leaves you a bit humble. It leaves you a researcher, a critical thinker, problem solver, because you do very difficult things. And I think it makes you a better human being. It should really. You'll be honest as academics, because you realize you don't know a lot. Then you realize research is based on philosophy. So, sometimes the way scientists throw their weight around like it's gospel too. No. It's based on philosophy. But let's not go there. So I think I would say, let's just pushes themselves. Sometimes, look for people who you can ventilate, or people you can talk to, or people going through the journey. That's the other thing, by the way.
Support system.
Support systems. If you're in a university where there's a research group, that would be awesome, because then people are working in the same area. If not, then get colleagues, get people even working in totally different disciplines, because they're researchers. Let's have support systems. Talk. Even if it's your family, let them know. Sometimes I'll be, I want to tell them I'm in trouble. Tell them know what's going on. They can stand with, they can encourage you, but share with others, other researchers, other mentors, and just hang in there, because I think finishing is a good thing. And ultimately, of course, you make your contribution, but above all, you become a researcher. And for me, I say it's a platform to the different areas that you like to go. So I think let's look for support structures. Let's look for people who can encourage us. Let's look for people who can listen to us. Let's look at even different researchers in different areas. You could even present, because with a real researcher, they'll be able to see areas that they can actually make a contribution, or even ask you difficult questions. It opens you up to ideas. And maybe look for opportunities to give seminars, give opportunities to, present some paper, or in a workshop, or in some symposium. God, just share a little bit of your work, and people can speak into it. But, because there are many people who've given up.
True. I'm hoping those who are watching, or who will watch later on, will, even who have given up, will realize there is still life, and they can pick up and finish.
They can pick up and finish. You struggle for 4 years. You ain't go nowhere. Now you're starting your real work after 4 years. You know what I mean? So I think let's just hang in there. I think there's value in doing a PhD and completing it as a researcher, and also as a problem solver, as a creative thinker, as an innovator. I think there is actually value in carrying out a PhD.
Yeah. Wow. 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 It's been very deep, very interesting. It's interesting because I have known you for long, but I think this bit of we've never discussed this bit of your of your life. It's almost a lot, and very interesting. And it's something that a prospective or even a current student would find very helpful. You know, as you're still trying to get through the very many things and how to deal with it. So I don't know if you have some final remarks before we bring it to a close.
I think I like to say that not two journeys are similar. There are people who come in and they're very okay. Sometimes you have a very supportive supervisor or a very supportive research group, or they've probably are working on a problem. They've done a lot of work, so you're able to quickly come in. They give you some things to look at. They give you some problems to solve, and very easily you're able to identify what you want to do. And then they support structures. Then you clearly identify your problem and refine it. Maybe let me just state that.
Yeah.
A lot of time we want to rush in and do stuff, but until your problem, the statement of your problem is clear, precise, concise, distilled, and very clear, please don't go.
Don't
For
rush.
me, I think high learning that's the most difficult part of your research.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting because you have to find out, you've actually been able to read, you've done all this, and you've identified research gaps. By that I mean research that is gaps in knowledge, cutting edge knowledge.
Yeah.
So you've done a lot of that, and then ultimately you can see, okay, this is a problem. What is a problem?
Yeah.
And then you're asking, why is it a problem? Why is it important?
Yeah.
What has been done to try and solve the problem? Then you're asking, why has that attempt not worked? I like giving that scaffolding very quickly to come up with that problem. So clearly get it right. But I would say that once you get it right, then of course your research questions are clear. Then of course after that you just decide this is the knowledge I need, this is how the kind of research design I need, this is methodology, and of course you go out and carry out your experiments, and of course you do your analysis. But I think, like I started earlier, I'd said before you go into it, count the cost.
Yeah.
I'd already said it would be nice to look at universities which probably are pursuing research which is close to your interest. It would be nice to look at those faculties or departments and go into the profiles of those professors. A lot of things is online right now. The kind of work they've done, the kind of papers they've, what they are doing, their research interest, the profiles of those departments, so that you're very, very clear whether that's something that you want to do. In times, even engage those professors, engage those departments, and just begin to have a conversation. Many of them would want to have a conversation. People are interested, so that you can then begin to establish, is this where I want to do my PhD? Is this the area I want to do it in? Or are these the kind of people that I want to, shall I get the value that I need? So I think you need to resolve that. Then the other thing I'll say is that today, I think, and I'm sure you're aware, Harry, there are lots of research. There's a lot of funding for PhD research today.
True.
There are a lot of scholarships, so don't feel boxed in. Just develop your area, look at different universities, and look for funding. Sometimes you may even get funding to fund in a different university. They're out there. Of course, I'm an international organization, so that in case you want to do it, don't feel that you don't have money. Look around.
Just step out, the money will come.
The money will come. If I get admission, once you get admission, then you can now use your admitted student. And of course, you go in, and then of course begin to more or less look for funding. So I think that's what I like to say. I know our journey, took all kind of turns, so we didn't probably cover some of the areas you wanted us to cover.
No, it's good, and I like because you've said it that no two journeys, and I think there's someone else I was interviewing, and also she emphasized that no two journeys are the same, which is true. But there are lessons we can pick, from your story. Now there's so many lessons that I've picked for myself and even for the others who are watching, which I think is very helpful as before you start, as you are on with the journey, even to the very end.
Yeah. In fact, just let me just say this. It just reminded me of a thing, not two journeys are the same. So I was just saying, some people will come in and after their problem is clear, the methodology is in place. In the next 1 year or 18 months, they're done.
They're done.
It takes 2 years, or my goodness, they're done, man. 6 years down the road, you're still struggling. Others will be very clear. This is my, these are my research questions. This is my methodology. This is my research design. And it's clear cut, move. Others, they fumble around and struggle around forever, But ultimately, they'll finally be able to deliver something at the very end. So the journey is part of the experience. It's part of the learning process. There's a lot of learning. You actually back, you see, you learn a lot. So don't let that discourage you. Even if you move five steps and then move back 2 steps. Don't let that discourage you at all. That's part of the learning process. And it's just helping you to think out of the box. It's helping you to see different people, and different thinking of different researchers. That's another story. I used to sit with my colleague and discuss different papers, different researchers. Then you realize it's not. There's also the personality.
That's true.
Kind of things. So I think that's something to just learn. Not two journeys are the same. Don't get discouraged. But at least you shared a few things.
Yes. So much. So much, in fact. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam Ruhiu. I think we're going to bring it to a close here. I really appreciate your sharing. I know so many people are going to be helped, not just in Kenya, but even beyond, those who are working on their PhDs. And if you're new here on PhD Stories, please make sure you have liked the video, share in your groups, your PhD groups, and share with anyone who has not, who would be interested and actually would benefit from these stories. And let them like, and even for you, subscribe to the channel. And let's keep learning, let's keep encouraging ourselves. So thank you so much, Dr. Sam Ruhiu. Wishing you the very best ahead.
I'm grateful to have been here, to have made some little contribution. It's interesting, and whoever watches this.
Thank you. Let me bring it to a close now. Great times ahead.